Arthur was a man with a generous heart, or at least that's how everyone described him. Since childhood, he had learned that pleasing others was the same as being loved. A yes guaranteed a smile, a pat on the back, the validation that he was good. But no was uncharted territory, a frightening abyss of conflict and disapproval that he avoided at all costs. And so, Arthur built his entire life on a foundation of yeses that slowly began to collapse beneath him. At work, Arthur was the savior. "Could you help me with this report? The deadline's too tight," Sarah would ask, knowing her own afternoon would be free, while Arthur drowned in spreadsheets that weren't even his. "Of course, no problem," he'd reply with a tired smile, while his own tasks piled up, forcing him to stay late under the cold fluorescent lights of an empty office. Recognition never came in the form of promotions or raises, only in the form of more requests. Home wasn't any different. His sister Helen called every week with a new crisis. "Arthur, my tire went flat and I don't have money to fix it. Can you lend me some?" she'd plead in that familiar voice he could never resist. Arthur, who had been painstakingly saving to repair a water leak in his own apartment, transferred the money without hesitation. "Of course, sis, take care of it," he'd say, even as he felt the weight of that choice in his gut, knowing the loan would quietly turn into yet another forgotten debt. Even with his friends, Arthur couldn't bring himself to set boundaries. "Let's go out tonight, it's gonna be amazing," Mark, the most energetic of the group, would insist. Arthur, exhausted after a week of double shifts and barely any sleep, felt every muscle in his body begging for rest. But the fear of being the killjoy, of seeming boring, of losing their affection, made him give in. "Sure, guys, where are we meeting?" he'd reply, trading the peace of his couch for forced smiles and conversations he could hardly follow. The weight of so many yeses began to show on his body. Arthur lived with constant headaches, a fatigue coffee couldn't cure, and a growing sense of invisibility. He was the pillar holding everyone up, yet he felt his own structure about to give way. No one seemed to notice his sacrifice. They had simply grown accustomed to his endless availability. He wasn't a person anymore, just a convenient tool, always at hand, rarely valued for who he truly was. The collapse came on a rainy Tuesday. Arthur had spent the entire previous night finishing a colleague's project, the same colleague who had left early to celebrate his birthday. He'd slept barely 3 hours. The next morning, his sister called, asking him to babysit her son because she had a last-minute job interview. He had barely hung up when his boss summoned him into his office. "Arthur, excellent work on the quarterly report," his boss began. And for a brief second, Arthur's heart swelled with hope. The board was so impressed, they've decided to move up the next project. "I need a complete draft on my desk by Friday." Friday. 3 days. A project that should take weeks, crammed into an impossible deadline. And in that moment, something inside Arthur snapped. The exhaustion, the silent anger, the years of swallowed sadness, they overflowed. He looked at his boss, at the calendar on the wall, at the rain hammering against the window, and he saw his entire life of concessions flash before his eyes. He saw the boy who shared his lunch, even when hungry, the teenager who did the group project alone, the man who gave up his own dreams to fulfill everyone else's. He drew a deep breath, the cold air burning his lungs. His heart pounded, his palms were slick with sweat. The fear of rejection, of conflict was paralyzing, but for the first time, the pain of continuing to say yes was greater. "Sir, I appreciate your trust," Arthur began, his voice trembling, "But I can't do this." The silence that followed was deafening. His boss stared, eyebrows raised. Panic surged through Arthur, the urge to take it back, to apologize, to agree. But he stood his ground. "I'm already overloaded with work, and I've taken on responsibilities that weren't mine just to support the team. Delivering a project of this size in 3 days with the quality it deserves is impossible. I need a more realistic deadline to do good work." The fear was real, but beneath it bubbled something new. Relief. A profound, liberating relief, like letting go of a rope he hadn't realized he'd been clinging to with white-knuckled desperation. To his surprise, his boss didn't explode. He blinked, processed the words, and finally nodded. "I understand, Arthur. You're right. We'll reevaluate the timeline." Arthur left the office feeling lighter than he had in years. That no, so feared, hadn't destroyed his world. On the contrary, it had opened a door. For the first time, he had defended himself, taken a stand, and in doing so, earned a respect his endless yeses had never given him. That was the first of many no's. He said no to his sister, explaining that he loved her, but could no longer be her emergency bank account. The conversation was hard, but it established a healthier boundary. He said no to his friends, suggesting quieter plans when he was tired, and discovered that true friendship didn't depend on him showing up to every party. Learning to say no transformed Arthur. He finally had time for himself, to fix the leak in his apartment, to read the books that had been gathering dust, to simply rest. He discovered that setting boundaries didn't push people away. It filtered in the ones who truly respected him. His relationships became more authentic, built on mutual exchange instead of one-sided sacrifice. The life lesson Arthur carried was clear, powerful, and deeply human. Saying no is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of self-preservation and courage. It is the recognition that our needs, our time, and our energy matter. It is the bravery of placing ourselves as a priority, not above others, but alongside them. Because only when we find the strength to express our limits and our truth can we build relationships that are healthy and live a life that is truly ours, not just a reflection of everyone else's desires.